Hey guys, welcome back to Tabletop Glory. My name is Graham Johnson, and today's video is brought to you by Mushroom Guy. Now, if you have been following the channel for a while, or maybe you've even been following me over on TikTok, you'll know that Mushroom Guy is one of my moderators, and Mushroom Guy actually does a lot of commissions with me, and I'm very grateful for that. But he had a really awesome idea, and that was to take this little cool UFO toy and kind of do a color change effect on it, similar to how I do weapon bloom, which is the way that we paint metal when it looks as though it's heated up and cooled back down. A lot of people like to do that for their Warhammer figures on their guns, and we're going to be talking about that a little more in depth at the end of the video. Today's video, we're just going to kind of skip along through the process of painting this little toy, and then we'll go more into an actual tutorial at the end. So as you guys can see here right out of the gate, it's a pretty small little box. I've already taken the whole thing apart and we've started the first layers of priming. Now it was painted silver like you'll see here on the back. I just went ahead and put a gloss black on the other side, as we're going to be using true color change paints on one side, and we're going to be doing my style of color change on the other. Now it's not going to be that pearlescent, iridescent type look that you get with true color change paints, where you can move it and manipulate it and see it change color. It's going to be more like a fly's eyes, where when you would look at them you'll see that rainbow color across them. That's how I tend to do my color change effect, and it's very similar to the bloom on weapons. So first off, we're going to go ahead and we're going to hit this with some Turbo Dork. We're just using some of their color change green, the purple to green. And as you can see, the green is quite heavy on this. I was actually very surprised by that, because on the packaging, based on the color in the cup, I was assuming it would be quite heavy on purple. Now, I was taking advantage of the fact that my airbrush was acting up again, and I kind of wanted to put a little bit of texture on this. I figured it wouldn't mess with the color change all that much, and you'll see in the final product that it doesn't. However, it was spitting a bit more than what I was planning to, and as you can see, I keep having to wipe off the really big globs and then kind of fix it. If I had just spent an extra 5 minutes cleaning my airbrush, I wouldn't have had this problem, but that's on my ADD and my laziness. Now, the trick to my color change effect and the trick to weapon bloom is using basically translucent paints. And so you can either choose to use contrast paints here, or you can use something like Tamiya clear paints. Just understand that we're going to be mimicking the rainbow, and the fewer the colors we use, the better, because they're going to blend with each other. We're going to want to try to spray these all relatively in one go, so that the paint is still wet on the model when we move to the next color, and that's going to help with that transition between the colors. So we can add a little bit of airbrush medium, that's fine, it's not the end of the world. If you do that, just understand that you may have to do multiple passes of the same color and basically redo all these processes over again. In my opinion, that's the best way to do it, especially when applying with an airbrush. But just keep all that in mind, and we're going to basically take a clip art picture of a rainbow, and we're going to use that as our inspiration for which colors to use and when. We're going to be sticking mostly with the red and yellow and orange spectrum for the bottom of this saucer, but when we move on to doing the weapon bloom, we're going to go all the way through the rainbow. Now I'm just spraying a little bit of green around the edges, and what that's doing is it's going to reinforce that wraparound color, bringing that green from the top all the way through to the bottom, and it's going to help to unify those colors instead of there being this harsh transition line from the top to the bottom where the two halves of the model separate, and it's going to make that separation a little less noticeable. Now we're just doing a little bit of a cleanup here with a Q-tip and some rubbing alcohol. We haven't sealed anything, so it comes right off. We're trying to remove most of it from those exposed LEDs and a little bit more from around that middle. I went a little heavy on the red, and I want to add some more yellow to the middle here, so we're just going to peel that back off and then wipe it down with the dry side of the Q-tip so it's ready to go for paint. So if you're following along at home doing something similar and you've got exhaust ports on your model, you could do black chalk pastel, you could use weathering pigments, or you can just use black paint like I am here. For this particular item, it's just a toy and it's going to be sitting on a desk. It's just meant to look cool, and it's probably going to get handled a lot, so I'm using paint because it'll be a little bit more durable. I'm going through and doing an initial dry brush, and then I kind of just go ham all over with a bit of a mixture of stippling and dry brushing, just to build up a nice thick texture of black around all these exhaust ports. Now there aren't too many panel lines here, but we're going to go ahead and take some of this Tamiya panel line black, and we're just going to apply it to the few panel lines that there are around those outside edges. I try to reinforce a few other places with the panel line, but these colors are just so vibrant it shows through, and the only places where it really sticks well is around those thick panel lines at the top and very bottom. Now I went a little heavier in some places with that Turbo Dark paint, and you'll see that those are the places where it shows up a bit more pink. But for right now I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to add a blue tint along this plastic here, as there already are blue LEDs that show up through, but I want it to not only diffuse but to give a really dark blue. It wasn't all that noticeable in the original toy before I took it apart, and I want to make sure it's really noticeable now. Now I could have left the head that bizarre lime green and just put some washes on top of it, but I really wanted to darken things up, and I wanted to kind of dirty things up and make him look just a little bit more realistic. So I went ahead and I removed all the mold lines from the model, and I'm just going to go ahead in with this nice dark green paint, and then I'm going to apply a green wash. Now the green wash I'm using specifically is a Athonian Camo shade, and that's because it's a mix between brown and green, so it'll be nice and dirty. Doing a light stippling of moot green to just kind of build up some layers of color, and then hitting it once again with that green wash and going a little bit thicker this time around. Just give it a quick cleanup on those eyes with a little bit of black, and he's all set to go. That's all we need to do. Now you could choose to gloss it or to go ahead and put a matte finish on this. It's entirely up to you at this point. It's whatever you want for your model. And all that was really left at this point was our final assembly. Now working on this little toy here was actually quite a lot of fun. It was a nice little refresher project, and it actually had its own little challenges. I didn't want to completely remove the circuit board, and finding a way to protect everything in there while I worked on it, especially using spray paints and things like that, was a little tricky. I could have used masking tape, but I didn't want to waste a ton of time masking everything off, and I found a neat and creative way of just kind of jamming some cotton buds and other things like that in there, and it seemed to work just fine. I was able to get it all back out with no problem. But in any case, here we are with the final product. This is what we ended up with. It's really neat. I think it's awesome. You could probably tint the edges of those rings with the lights to kind of tint them a different color. But again, these are blue LEDs, so you're probably not going to get a huge range of color. You may be able to change them to green, but good luck getting them to be any color other than that without changing the LED themselves. Although, that all now having been said, let's take a second and let's talk about how I do weapon bloom on miniatures. So this next part's going to be a little bit quick, and that is mostly because, well, it actually goes rather quick. We kind of apply 2 or 3 coats at once while the paint is still wet, so it does a good job at blending together, and then we do the other half of this. Now you can skip colors, and I'll mention where you can skip colors, so if you're working on a much smaller piece you can kind of skip through the spectrum much faster, but in this case we're going to be using one of the large cannons from an Imperial Knight as our example. So using a rainbow as our guide, we're going to go ahead and start with the color red, or in my case more on a crimson level. Now I use Carroburg Crimson with a single drop of Blood Angel Red mixed in. I feel this gives us a really good crimson color, and we're just going to focus that right on the front. We're going to leave a little bit of that silver behind, and we're going to start just past the front of the barrel there. We're going to go all the way around, and then we're going to dump about as much of the excess as we can. Now I'm using Lamenter's Yellow, but any kind of a yellow wash or glaze will work just fine here. And we're going to go ahead and do a little bit larger of a swath this time, overlaying on top of the original red that we just laid down, as well as going beyond where our next layer will start. And we're doing that because it's going to help everything to blend. Now you'll notice I went a little heavy with the yellow here, and we end up fixing that later on. But just know that this section needs to be a little bit bigger than all of our other sections. Coming in with a little bit of a green, I refer to this as a filter color. You'll see very little of this when it's all said and done, because our next 2 layers are actually going to end up on top of this green. That's okay, but we want to do a nice thin layer of this right on the edge of the yellow so that it blends that yellow in with the next 2 colors we end up adding, and that is our blue and our purple. So colors that you could skip the green stage if working on a smaller miniature, and you could skip the purple stage, which is the final one, and you could just use blue. However, moving right along, we want to go ahead and add a strip of blue. We want to make just a strip of blue. We don't want to have this big large swath. The trick here is that the blue is going to help the purple fade into the green, and the blue is almost entirely on top of the green. We're talking about 75% of the green we just laid down should get covered up with blue, and then we're going to go ahead and filter purple almost directly on top of it. So there should be very little of the green remaining, very little of the blue remaining, and then purple to finish it all off. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that we're using our purple as a filter layer, so if we can get the purple, the green, and the blue all done at the same time, it's all going to blend together much more efficiently. Now, you could all do this with a brush, but especially with large things like this gun barrel, it's a lot easier to do this by using an airbrush. You can get really cheap airbrushes online, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to get spare parts, and you'll just end up having to replace the entire thing when it finally does die. Now, one of the last things that we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to put a little bit of weathering pigments on the tip of the barrel. This is going to help blend that red into the tip of the barrel in case you didn't get quite a perfect match. And basically, I'm going to be using soot from Tamiya, but you can use pretty much almost anything. Now, it's really important to keep in mind that the smaller the barrel you're using, the closer you want to keep all of these segments together, meaning you want to cover up more of the previous color. And it's very important that at the very least you get the red, the yellow, and the purple all on there in order to sell this effect. And there you have it, folks. I know that was a really fast tutorial right there at the end, but it really is that simple. And I know I was talking really quickly, but you honestly can do it just as fast as I talked through it. It's not really crazy, it's not super complicated, and if you do the layers light enough, you can actually do them just all at once. Now, that's a tutorial that you guys have been asking for a while, and we finally had a good excuse to do it, so I'm putting it out there. Thank you guys so much for all the love and support. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit the like button and share it around with your friends and any hobby groups that you may be a part of. It really does do a great job at helping to get us out there, and it's a really great free way for you to help promote my YouTube channel and to help make the dream of maybe being a content creator someday a real reality. I can't do it without you guys, but the fact that you're here and watching the video means all the world to me. Until next time, may your display case always be filled and your pile of shame never run empty. Till next time.